welcome to our fourth meeting. It's our penultimate meeting. We have one more after this. And I know a couple of people alerted us that they have to leave early. So just forecast so what's going to happen at the end. Because if you could both fill out the feedback form before you leave, we would appreciate that. And then the second piece is, we're not exactly sure because it depends on what happens tonight. But one of the things we want to talk about in that last half hour about the last meeting is that the recommendation list will continue our guests to expand as a function of both today's meeting, any conversations and thoughts you bring to it. I know the the Southbridge Educators Association also has a list of recommendations that they want to bring to our attention. So basically that list that's in front of you is going to get denser and maybe expand a little bit. And we're projecting that it will peak at the end of this meeting. In other words, it's not going to get bigger after this. It could. But usually what happens is that last meeting, you have to go in the opposite direction. Because you, for the most part, really take a very expansive view of what would help the district. But our experience has been if there are too many recommendations, too many pieces to this thing, it ends up losing kind of the power it can have if you shrink and concentrate on your top tier ideas. Now, some people are frustrated with that because you have to leave some things out, and it's totally up to you. But our recommendation is the more expansive you get, the more diluted the impact of recommendations. So our suggestion is that we take that last meeting and spend a portion of the time through a fair process where people are actually going to vote to, create the top 5 buckets. And that within those buckets, your top 3 recommendations. Now, you can go beyond that. There's no formula to it, but we think a more succinct, highly supported set of recommendations is just going to carry more weight. That's an opinion on our part. You don't have to listen to it. But we're going to recommend that we go in that process, and we're going to talk about that in the last half hour, so you'll have a chance to disagree and debate, but I didn't want to leave the people out who have to leave early, so that's why I'm giving you a forecast, and maybe during the break, if you have a strong opinion, you can let us know. If anyone else is doing that. And before we get to the sort of catching up with each other, you've had a chance to look at some new materials, some adapted materials. I'd like to, hear what other ideas you bring to the group. It's come to our attention during the week that several members of this group at times have felt uncomfortable sharing more openly and directly some of their concerns. And Dave and I, as facilitators, obviously have influence on this atmosphere, the meeting atmosphere, but we have no influence over your working conditions. So we recognize that. We don't want to be naive. But I want to put that out there to publicly acknowledge that, we've heard from several times that there are various people on this committee who feel reluctant to share openly what their concerns are. And I'm just going to share a piece of research that, I'm very familiar with in my sort of day job. But one of the things that we work with districts do is try to create an atmosphere where people can be open and transparent with their concerns. And there's a rule of thumb that a famous educator came up with by the name of Roland Barthes, and he said that the health of the system is indirectly proportional to the number of non-discussables. And non-discussable is a topic that people are talking about in the parking lots and in other sort of quiet places, but they're very afraid to bring it up at meetings. So they're talking about it, but not in the right places. And Barth's research said that as the number of non-discussables goes up, the health of the system goes down. And so I mention all of this because this committee has the capacity, if they so choose, to put in a recommendation about culture and climate. You could put in a recommendation that alerts the receiver that this is an issue. It's not our job to come up with a solution. We know leadership is going to play a role in that, and lots of other things, but what gets on the list, is up to you. Does it make the highest priority? Up to you. And because of this information that came to our attention, the one shift that we made in today's meeting is to expand the number of topics in our mini discussions from 3 to 4, adding culture and climate as a place to have a conversation about that. And so we'll have 2 rounds of mini discussions. In each round, the groups will have a choice to pick either topic A or topic B, like we did a couple of meetings ago. And so we hope to gather some thought, some opportunity to hear your thinking about culture and climate in response to this concern. Okay?
Our accelerated improvement plan, the third thing on there was around culture and climate and communication. So I mean, it's a large enough topic where it should absolutely be.
Okay.
That's just fine.
So I just want to open it up for the next few minutes to comment on either any of the materials that you received, as we did last time, any additional conversations or learnings you may have happened across in the last week. Is there anything you want to comment on? Question? In the new set of recommendations, we tried to italicize the things that emerged last week to separate it out from the last set of recommendations.
Yeah. No, these are, that's not the one I passed out. Here's
One suggestion that I had brought up, and I don't know if it should be a recommendation or not, but there was a suggestion of trying to consolidate some work between town government and schools. Is that somewhere?
Yeah, it is. I'll see if I can find it quickly. It's number 19 in bucket 5.
It's not in the recommendation section that we got in the package. Right?
Actually,
recommendation.
It is. I gave you the wrong thing.
Number
Sorry.
17.
It's number 17. I said 19. It's literally the last one in bucket 5. Just to read to your line, it says explore ways to share resources between the town and the school as a means of expanding services without outstripping resources.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just, all I'm saying is up to recommendation up to 11, so I'm not quite sure. Oh. Thank you.
And I gave the examples you gave as potentially HR, accounting, plowing.
Oh, it's 5.
Right.
That's right. I'm looking at it. 5. I'm looking for then 17. Am I shoot that? No, I see. Right, sorry.
We also incorporated Ashley's, a number of things from Ashley's list that we discussed last time. All right, I don't want to cut anybody off, Marie.
I just have one.
Maria, about
On number 6, when it says to significantly strengthen PLL instruction, one thing that I was thinking about is in special ed, they do like a lot of minutes. I think it's been talked about actually this week, which is what gave me the idea. Why don't we do something like that for ELL students to see if we have sufficient staff to meet the minutes that these, or needs of these students?
So you're suggesting a recommendation to audit the services currently to
Yeah.
see if they are meeting what they are.
Yeah, of the current ELL population.
The district review that people referenced clearly stated it wasn't happening at that time. And you're saying a more updated version might be helpful.
Or publish the one that was done, because in the district review, I didn't actually see that auditing minutes.
Okay.
It's part of the AIP action.
There's an ELL action plan.
Yes.
Separate of that,
And I don't know if it was completed.
All right, if there are no other comments about it, oh, you did, actually, sorry.
So number 10, the increase the extracurricular offerings for students. That motion would require support for extracurricular activities, but it was more establish it as a requirement. So a minimum of 1 day after school. It was more of a requirement, not a request for support. It's just no one comment.
Okay, we'll make that adjustment. Before we dive into the rest of the meeting, we do have translators here, if anyone needs that. Is that accurate? Yes? And we also have a suggestion box if people in the audience want to write a suggestion or a comment that we will read. And during the break, we encourage members of the audience and members of the LSG to have an say. Ron?
Can I just bring forward a little bit of data, just because at our last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the shrinking amount of classrooms in this school, which I thought was sort of interesting. And it was implied to me over and over again that there's more students. And I even asked about the housing, and they said that there must be more people in the same amount of housing. So I went back and checked the numbers of students, because I was sort of curious about that. The number of students, just for information purposes, in 2011, 2012, was 2,205. It went up in 12 and 13 to 2,275, which went up by, that's about 70 students that year. But as of 2015, 2016, it's down to 2,186. So it's at the lowest level of students in the last 5 years. So I still don't quite understand that issue of what the cause of those classrooms disappearing are, but I thought it would let you know it's not an increase in students. And in fact, I think with school of choice, more people are leaving at the middle school, high school level. So even, I would think that there's less kids in the middle school, high school level.
as far
I don't know the answer to the question.
classrooms go, it's more about scheduling the amount of offerings that we have and how many courses are going on. At the same time, it's not necessarily about the amount of
Kids.
students, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at number 7 too, the way that got framed, because I knew you had to leave early last week, Ron.
Yep.
It's called rise, it should be raise the bar, not rise the bar, but number 1, asking the way it's currently written, they ask the receiver to address the following impediments, rather than to get into we know what the solution is, which is insufficient curricular offerings at the high school, very large class sizes at the middle school, and preschool opportunities that are uneven and do not reach all students. People were sort of hypothesizing what the solution should be, and we sort of backed out of that and said, well, look, we just want these problems addressed. There may be multiple reasons or multiple ways to do it. Eileen?
Yes, number 6,
Yeah.
talk about executing the ELL instruction. And number 3 say hire a new ELL director. I think it's a little more than just hiring a new director for teachers that speak, that are bilingual.
What would you like to add?
Hmm?
What would you like to add to expand it?
Like not only the ELL director, but at the same time to recruit new teachers that speak the language.
Yeah, that may be a good segue to ask Dave to share the recommendations from the Teachers Association. Does that, if I remember correctly, that's in there?
Yes, it is. We can pass those down. So I'm not sure how in-depth you want me to go. Do you want me to just cursory or just kind of quickly go through?
You know what I was going to recommend, Dave, since people haven't seen these before, I'd like to give people a few minutes just to read them. And then once they read them, let's open it up to questions, and then you can respond, or, I don't know, if you want to respond, both of you, but, give people a chance to digest it first. Two more minutes. Okay, questions, comments?
Can I just do just a quick overview? The view from 10,000 feet on this is from the teachers, is that none of this works without collaboration, and I think we've been dealing with that, been talking about that forever. The school needs to work with the town, needs to work with community organization, like it says in the first paragraph there, you know, our issues in the school are not just the school issues, they're town issues, and town issues are also become school issues. So we need to look at this as part of the large picture. That reference there, the Southbridge School Safety Report, and Mr. Bishop, I'm sure will remember, back in 2002, the district and the SEA jointly combined to do a survey, based on a survey, a study and evaluation of the safety primarily at the high school, and that resulted in a document where they made some recommendations. Second down there, from the teacher's standpoint, that improvement in this district will only happen with inclusion of the teachers, not, you know, including us in the decision making, not just recipients of people making the decision and dishing it out to us. The third, we've talked about this before, the directions and misdirections and fits and stops that we've had with administration has been a problem. And the last paragraph, well, the second one to the last one, is really that the teachers are willing to do the hard work to make the change around here. For everything else, you can read it. I have incorporated some of Ashley's. You'll see some of what Ashley's recommendations on there are. This is really a compilation. What we tried to do is take all the surveys and our conversations with the faculty and combine them into, you know, organize them into subtopics and then combine like issues. So we had a one-page, like you said earlier, we didn't have 15 pages, we have one page. So under safety and secure learning environment, those create a school safety at-risk task force, which includes teachers, you know, police, community members, you know, looking at safety in our building as a community issue, not just as a school issue, including faculty and administration. Interestingly enough, we just had a meeting in the high school, a ad hoc faculty administration school safety council for the high school. And the third one down there, which is one of the recommendations in the school safety, is include the students in. They have a lot of good ideas, and they have a much better handle on what's going on here and the pulse of this place than I think most adults. They can tell you what will work and what won't work much better than a lot of high-paid people. And we've talked about this before, finding a way to increase involvement of both teachers and parents at each school. And one of the recommendations is trying to really push the PTA, PTSA at the middle school and the high school, is get them very much involved. A lot of the other stuff I think is pretty self-explanatory. I don't know whether if anyone wants to chime in, if John wants to, any of the other teachers. Something that we talked a fair amount about is on the top of the second page, which is for closing the achievement gap, is providing free preschool for 100% of the kids, and also transportation.
Eligible children.
What's that?
100% of eligible children.
Right.
What do you define that? Every kid, or every
So,
poor kid, or?
I'm gonna leave that to Julie because that's your ball game.
Eligible children just mean school age or preschool,
So that's every kid in Southbridge.
yes, of preschool age.
Does anyone else in the state have that?
I would say probably not.
Head Start program is a pre-program for children 3 to 5. But my understanding is that the helping hands parent has to pay, but that go by sliding fee, they don't really pay the whole amount of money.
It's not a sliding scale anymore, they did away with that.
No, we're sending children where they're confused,
Yeah.
Another thing is, it is coming, I think that Holyoke have a preschool that is for 4 years old. I think that this year, the money was given to Worcester. I think it's coming around, having come to Southbridge, I was very surprised that when the government released the money, Southbridge was not one of the towns that they chose for the 4 years old preschool, preschool. But my understanding that it's coming around. Maybe next year it's going to be more towns because that is the help for the Obama initiative that all 4 years old to be in the school. So I don't know if somebody else has any new information, but that is the information that I have.
Are there questions that would help you understand one of the recommendations without getting into an opinion about it? You know, if there's something in here unclear that we want to raise with people, because I was, Evelyn?
I wanted to mention something about the bilingual, this page 1, workforce development. It was a recommendation about establish an adult basic education. Our program with the community action offered in our site in 25 Park Avenue an adult basic education. We offer ABA and we offer ESL and we offer the high set, formerly called GED.
That's very good to know, because I was unaware of that, so that's, I mean, so we can check one thing off, right?
Well, I think Kristen has brought this up several times, that mapping the resources, I think it might have been Kristen, and it might have been others, that we keep on seeing that there are things happening in the community that could be potentially really helpful. And I think one of the things that's buried in our recommendation list is this notion of mapping the resources so that everyone knows what's possible. And there still may be some reasons why it's not a good match, but we don't want to use the excuse that we didn't know, at the very least, right? So that would come under that.
Something else that could probably tie into that too is having someone at the district level that's responsible for resource accessing. So as we're talking about preschool and the possibility, I would assume that would be done through an application process.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's having a person who's responsible for overseeing grant opportunities, resource opportunities, how do you seek those free resources that are out there, but then also resource mapping in the community. So tying in the two together, I think, is really important. And having that staffing as part of the leadership team.
We come close to what you just described, but not, you don't nail it quite as clearly as what you just did. If you look at number 3 on the recommendation list, key support areas where leadership is most needed. If you look at number 2, right below ELL director, now that doesn't say anything about grants and preschool, so it's right there. We may want to expand that, but that might be a place to insert what you just sort of sustain.
So you're talking about hiring a person to be a grant writer. I know some districts have that position. Basically, if they hit on one grant, they pay for themselves.
Right, and not only just grant writing, a lot of districts do grant writing and community development.
Mm-hmm.
So this way, it's also bringing in those outside resources, partnering with resources. So it may be grant writing to bring funds into the district so they could operate programming, but also being the linkage between the community resources as well.
One of the things that, you know, what I would recommend if it's acceptable to the group is that we fold these recommendations into the buckets that we currently have so that next week we'll have a chance to, you know, wrestle with them and see if they make the top tier of your recommendations. If you look at social service, for example, those 2 recommendations, those 2 bullets, would probably fit neatly into category 5, our bucket number 5, you know, which says right now strengthen parent community engagement at all levels, blah, blah, blah. And I think the recommendations fit neatly into places where There are currently buckets. In a couple of places, we'd have to create a new bucket. But one thing Dave and I can do is bring back an expanded list that has what we currently discussed, add these in the right places, create a new category, and then when you get the sort of the next iteration of the recommendations, these would be folded in if you would like to proceed that way. Does that make sense?
That's fine, just one comment, because I think this is a great job in what they put together. Particularly, there's a lot of things that don't require money, but there's a lot of things in here that do require money, right? So I guess I'm wondering is, some of these, in my opinion, are a lot of money. The question then becomes, if we're putting these recommendations, does it make sense to put in recommendations where we know we have no money to allocate towards this?
Sustainable.
You know, yeah, I mean, is there, I like to know, I mean, preschool I know, and there's qualifications for income, I believe, but to provide preschool for every kid would be, I don't know where that money would come from, it's a huge number. So to say that, while I love it and I agree with it, it's unrealistic unless the federal government came out with some big pot of money for it. So to put as a recommendation sounds great, but in my opinion, it wouldn't be realistic. So I don't know how we do those kind of challenges, or we just put every recommendation we like in them, or do we put in things that are more, I hate to say it, practical or realistic?
Well, that's where I think the next iteration, next week, that's where the wrestling match is going to have to come. Because you may feel as strongly as, look, that's not sustainable, I love the idea, but I'm arguing it should be on the list for the reasons you just said. Someone else might say, look, we do get a school improvement grant, hopefully, if we're going to spend some extra money, we want to put it there, and that's what you have to wrestle with. Does it show up on the list or not? Does it make your top whatever? I think that's the wrestling we have to do next week. And I think everyone, will either agree with you, or you may have a mixed group, but I think we have to kind of probably vote to see where we land.
The other thing I said is at the very beginning of the recommendation, the guidelines for us was to make it sustainable and manageable, right? But then there was this other part that said, but think big and don't be constrained by lack of resources. So it's a dual picture there. So appreciate the comment, but I guess I would just like to keep all those options still in play, even if they cost money, because we're not sure. From doing this in other places, we were kind of told, yeah, let's keep thinking big, let's keep thinking about what's possible. It's a little bit of a mixed bag.
So I have another costly suggestion for you. Under closing the achievement gap, many of our members have suggested that we need more special education teachers to support collaboration and inclusive classrooms that support all struggling learners. I am a special educator. When I collaborate with the general education teachers and go into their classroom to provide support, I always support at least several students in groups that do not have individualized educational plans, that are not labeled as students that have disabilities or that have special needs, but they are struggling. And really good teaching, when you really collaborate, incorporates all of that in very flexible groups that you can go in and out of. We just, our special ed supervisor just established a group. We had a wonderful training where general education teachers and special education teachers attended and worked together to decide how could they effectively collaborate. And when you do that, it enhances the general education of all the students in the building. To do that well, we need more staff. Whether we need to go out and spend a lot of money or look at how people are allocated, or both, I'm not sure. But I do know that we need more staff to do that well. But if you are proactive at the elementary level, it makes a huge difference later on in middle school. So we do have that one missing, and I would like to just add that one into.
I took it down, so I think it's a two-pronged thing where you want additional special educators, but who can work collaboratively with regular ed teachers to create more inclusive classrooms.
Right.
And so I'll add it under that heading for next week. Okay? We ready to do some mini discussions? before we do one last thing, do you want to check over the feedback from last week? Is there anything you want to talk about before we dive into that?
Can I bring up, we have a PTA starting in middle school finally.
We can check that one off.
Whole parents.
That was one of the teacher's recommendations, so, and that was also a recommendation in the report. So that's excellent.
Any comments on that? Questions, discussion? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Okay, so I guess sometimes it's easier to kind of get organized first in physical space and then give you direction. So if you go back to your main intent, there's a number in the black ink. That was your original first group, 2 readings ago. So we're going to go back to that. So the number in black ink, there should be 3 1s, 3 2s. If you can kind of get yourself situated, then we'll kind of talk about the next thing. So figure it out where the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s are going to go, and then once you get situated, we'll talk from there.
Use the black number.
The black number, yeah.
Come on, Heather. You're with the 18. You know. 4s.
Why don't we do professional things each year? You got a lot. Recommendations is two recommendations.
So, pick a seat.
How many you have?
So, no, not, we have too many initiatives. We have, you know, it's like, oh, let's see, we're different across
It's the back number, yep.
just make sure that's important.
So how can I, because I went back, I went to really too far. So how do you call it? Based on the sensitivity that we just
So we have to choose on.
Yeah, one of those 2 topics.
Don't do well with choice. 1.
6 is over here, and 3 is, okay. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Here we go. You should have groups of 3 and 1 group of 2. So if you go to the front page on the agenda, under number 2, the small group discussions, so you have, again, a choice. The 2 choices are professional development or recruitment and retention of educators and leaders. So first thing you're going to do is choose which of those topics your group wants to talk about. Then we're going to go to this new form, which is about the last 4 pages. You just take the first one, it looks like this. 4 pages. So whatever one of those topics you choose, you're going to reflect quietly a little bit, come to discussion, come up with 3 recommendations, your top 3 for that topic. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to first of all decide which group or which topic you want to cover. Make sure that we have people interested. So take a minute or 2, decide between professional development or recruitment, and then we'll see where we're at. Did you guys take, which one did you take? Professional development.
There's not a, I don't know, everybody can do the same one. Okay, so,
I don't want to get into too much. All right, so we have the bases covered. All right, so in the next 12 minutes, maybe up to 15, I want you to come up with your 3 best recommendations, either professional development or recruitment and retention. Okay? So, dive in, we'll check in with you in a couple minutes, 12 minutes or so. You do people, right?
So are we talking about? So let's so we got a couple of issues. One is
To keep the lights on.
so much our retention.
Yes, yes, it'll be, it's not.
Not exactly. Not exactly. Public comment.
So what, do you think it should? I guess I'm asking you, why would you want to go to a class where on a topic that you're deficient in, that you waste your time? Why would you want to go to a class? Yeah, that came up in an assessment of you that said, this wrong needs to be. She can't control her class, whatever. I'm just using the topic. Okay, because I both my kids have it, so that's why I know that's not the truth. But you know what I'm saying? That's
It's all.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to avoid that, right?
No, you need to avoid that.
Right, and
Because
that's,
that's not-
and that was in here as a differentiated.
Because you're right, you excel at certain things that other teacher doesn't excel at. So why is it difficult to professional development?
That would be something if you have a teacher who then you are very that is very skilled in working with children with education. Like only 5 years. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Use your own resources, in-house resources.
All right, well, I just,
And another thing is, I think that every year we in our evaluation. It's not surprised for the narrative. So what we have then, and then the business is one of the big classes. Potential training or even classes online, they go Can you imagine why that's what I would say. That would be probably worth like $200 I do that a lot. But at the same time, it's like
How many hours of professional
things that we can do to prepare.
We've got about 1 more minute before we start to collect these, so we have another minute to finish up.
like, I don't think that
There isn't.
that's why it's so good. And I think
All right, if you could just finish up your last thoughts, please. Let's come to one conversation for just a minute, please. We had a nice even distribution here. There were 3 groups. These 2 in the corner, this one over here, were doing professional development. And then the 3 in the middle were doing recruitment and retention. So we'll take it alphabetically. We'll go with professional development and we'll start here. So if you give us one, give your recommendation for professional development, and then we'll kind of go around.
Professional development based on the teacher's needs and what they need for the classroom.
You guys said professional
Okay, I was
development.
gonna say.
Yeah. Sorry, this was just one thing.
Okay, so we're each doing just one?
Yeah, and then we'll kind of go around, see if,
All right. Which one should we pick first? All right, let's go with one. This is kind of right off of our recommendation sheet. A multi-year district-wide plan for PD based on curriculum and technology needs, established at least 1 year in advance. And the teachers need to have input in that.
there's a lot in there.
Ask us now for next year's PD.
Mul-
One more time.
Sorry. Multi-year district-wide plan for PD based on curriculum and technology needs, established 1 year in advance. And the teachers need to have input into next year's plan now, so that we know what's coming up. We have the data, it's all in the reviews.
Okay. That was very comprehensive. That's good. That was good. Good.
I guess we combine all of those, so we stated that central office should use data, teacher input, and student feedback to create a professional development calendar prior to the end of the school year to be implemented for next year, as well as a long-term 3-year plan to make sure we're weaving in and hitting everything that we kind of need to. But we also, I guess our third would be to increase professional development time and access to professional development. It seems like, there's already a kind of a draft calendar for next year, and it includes 4 half days and 1 full professional development day outside of just the teacher orientation. And I think, I don't know, when I was teaching and I was doing a half-day PD, by the time you get there, I feel like the full-day PD is more beneficial because we're burned out running around trying to focus at the end of the day. But I just also think we don't have enough time.
So time and access, there was another thing you said in there, which was the student voice, which is MVP say, so let's come back to first.
One of the big things we just were talking about is training prior to implementation of programs or initiatives.
So that was a theme that had come up before, that there was not sufficient training before you initiated or put forward new initiatives. So enough professional development with enough advanced time to absorb it before you initiate something new.
I have the same should hold true for administration when it comes to rolling out.
Okay. So there's a whole other kind of thing that's like professional development for your administrators. And all these concepts should apply for the administrators also.
So we had another one that talked about and we should let you address that. What is professional development? It's not just buying a new series and showing everybody how to use it. That doesn't develop you professionally. It doesn't encourage a collaborative or inclusive type of working together. It's just showing you the instruction book and asking you if you have any questions. Professional development that teachers choose based on what they feel they need, that really helps them to grow, to collaborate, to include, to address all these areas that are critical needs that we haven't addressed before.
So, teacher choice was in there. I think I heard ongoing support as you start to roll
Right.
something out, and collaboration amongst teachers as they're going through this.
Right, PD on how to, not just what we're using, but the methodology. Where, what if we hire new people? How will we incorporate them into that whole group?
More comprehensive, more ongoing, more collaborative. Better, do you have anything new? Covered all the 3 bases.
Yeah.
Okay. How about over here?
The other one was just using our resources more wisely. PD doesn't have to cost money. There are community resources available to us to address some needs.
Can I expand that just a little bit? I think sometimes teachers, providing professional development for teachers is one of the biggest, when a teacher goes to see another teacher do something, in my experience, has been one of the most powerful, growth-oriented activities I've seen. So using our own resources, including our teachings.
I'll piggyback on that. Our special ed supervisor, as I said, sent several teams at all different grade levels to a 2-day seminar on collaborative and co-teaching. And then we now have a group that she established where we are going to do that. We're going to talk about what we learned. We're going to talk about implementing that into the classrooms. We did do a presentation back in our schools, those of us that went. So just piggybacking on what you said, just kind of extending that, and that's just time, but you don't have to pay anybody to come in and do that.
So teachers as resources, teachers as trainers, and using our expertise in-house too.
Could I just add?
Yeah.
Something I saw that worked really well in another district was the vertical teams or PLCs. So you pick topics like, we all know technology has been a hot topic, and collaboration and co-teaching and things like that, and then you open it up to the whole district, and then you work in groups for each one of those half days, and it's targeted. So you're able to assess what kind of technology we have, and where is it, and how much, and where do we need it more, and then you kind of grow each year from that, and pick specific topics to work together on, and that was really great for that district because it really built capacity, but it also changed the culture and climate to really look at your own people as the experts.
Teacher leaders, teachers as leaders, yeah. Okay. Were there other things in the professional development category that we haven't talked about that we want to get out before we switch topics?
I wasn't on that, but I'd like to piggyback on what Ms. Joyce said last week about it's not only teachers and administrators. There needs to be better PD for school committees. They're in charge of a $28 million budget. They're all, in most cases, non-educators, coming from all walks of life. So I think whatever plan we develop needs to encourage some type of serious development of school committee
I think that was
skills.
such an important one that would hit its own bucket.
Okay.
It was number 2.
Sorry.
I'm glad we keep, but it was so important. It's number 2 in the bucket list. Okay, let's shift gears and go to the recruitment retention groups, and I think we got 1, 2, 3 kind of right in the middle here. So let's go ahead. Dave.
So we have to divide it up into two things: recruitment and retention of teachers and administrators. So we can look at it from both sides. If we just want to put one of the issues that is a problem is just the lack of support. Lack of support behaviorally, lack of support academically from administrators. That is one of the reasons why we're losing we're losing teachers.
So that's on the retention end of things, is supporting newer teachers or,
Yeah.
I think that came up earlier too, is, not making judgments too quickly, but providing lots of support in those early years so that people want to stick around.
We kind of were talking more about the recruitment end of things and making sure that, again, whole education on exactly what goes into recruitment, because I didn't really understand the process, but making sure that we have job descriptions up to date. And because before you can market the district and put it out there, you need to know exactly what it is that you have, and that job description has to be up to date so that you are targeting exactly what you need, so that you're not wasting someone else's time or hiring the wrong person for the position, get them in there, and it turns out that's not quite what you wanted. So you need to make sure that those are up to date and current to the district's needs before you go out to market.
So accurate, up-to-date job description, but then taking them to places, I think there was the second part of it, I think that you said,
Yeah.
taking them to specific places with an intentionality to try to find a match.
Yes.
I got faith in leadership to set clear and consistent expectations and maintain a safe work environment through behavior supports.
Okay. So that was on retention and again,
Dovetail off of Dave, yeah, retention.
so supporting especially around the behavioral issues and instructional issues. Okay, Dave, back to your group.
So I think one of the things we thought was building our own capacity, and we have some wonderful EAs in the district that we love to see as teachers, and I know we could sort of, in my mind, when I drive home from here, I think of all these wonderful ideas, like if we had built a library, I know we were talking about like a parent center where there could be, books or a place, centrally located where parents could come and feel comfortable, maybe learn English or whatever they needed, but also if we had a library for our own people too, if they're taking a class on behavior management or they need to pass an MTEL, there was a space where they could, maybe have a book or teachers could be tutoring to help build that capacity in district.
You said something about EAs?
Oh, I'm sorry, educational assistants.
Okay, I
I'm
just
sorry.
trying to make sure that, so taking your folks that are already in the educational pipeline, but not necessarily ready to become teachers, and nurturing them, growing them, supporting them so that they become teachers, hireable teachers. Okay. Yeah.
What's interesting is when we talk about that, I looked at that from a totally different aspect. I looked at it as kind of finding a way to recruit EAs from the community. Getting out, having a way to recruit it, not so much move them up.
And there's two things, with the instructional or educational assistants, growing their capacity, but also recruiting new ones, which builds a bigger pool.
Right.
And then we also talked about the human resource director position and how important that position is to the district. And just making sure that that person has all of the supports that they need, and that's kind of like a really key position that people don't always think about.
So the HR director outreach to other places and make sure they bring in more people and supporting.
But I think that HR director, and Ron was explaining a lot of the other things that the HR person does, and it just touches on a lot of areas of, like legal things and workers' comp and all kinds of things.
No,
On recruitment, we put better relationships with college placement and better relationships with college education programs to find student teachers that eventually can be hired after they've had experience here.
So creating more relationships with colleges, other places, more student teachers, build the pipeline.
I think overall we don't create large enough applicant pools. I think we use school spring as the one source, and there's so many other avenues, teacher recruitment fairs, and many places to look for qualified people other than school spring.
So just building on that, we talked about using social media. My superintendent in the district I live in tweets all the time. And the kids follow him, and he's kind of comical now. He's gotten really popular actually at it. So, there are, of course, downfalls to that, but I think touching into the generation, my generation, is sort of the Facebook people, tweeting, and I think that's especially if the younger generation coming up is really utilizing that avenue. So I think really tapping into that.
So casting a broader net in lots of different ways. Social network, recruitment of colleges, more student teachers, developing the educational assistants. It's all about building a bigger pipeline.
I just want to add one more thought to that, to apprenticeships. The federal government there's money out there for non-traditional type job apprenticeships, so
And I think
just to be aware of that.
too, we used to, in some districts, there used to be Future Teachers of America and Future Nurses of America, and clubs like that, so we'll be building on our other ideas. We'll have
But Teach for America, is that something you would consider, possibly Teach for America or some other place? Okay.
And then we talked about making sure that we're setting the salary range correctly for those positions so that you are attracting quality people that match your job descriptions.
Are you talking more now about the administrative end or the teaching end or both?
Both.
Both.
We said, use of evaluation system to encourage teacher growth, opposed to using it as a punitive tool.
So using the new educator evaluation system as a form for growth and support tool for, what would you determine?
Punitive tool?
Not as a punitive.
Ash, knock it out.
Hi. So I don't think that the school does a prompt search for teachers when positions are lost. There are large gaps when the teacher is finally done with their 2 weeks, and then there's just this giant gap where kids just aren't learning anything, and there's just subs, and the job won't be posted immediately. So that kind of like presents a hiccup in job search and trying to fill that position. That really needs to be worked on on the recruitment end.
Start earlier, more timely, get things in place, anticipate what the openings are going to be. We covered all yours. Yeah. Bill, Mike, you covered everything. Oh, sorry.
We have a mentoring program, but I think that it could be strengthened. We could offer, like, in certain aspects, for example, if a mentee is supposed to be getting into a mentor classroom to observe and that kind of thing, we're struggling to find coverage to allow them to do so right now. Just firming that up a little bit so that.
So again, strengthening the mentoring program, supporting those younger teachers, creating more teacher leader roles. Do we get you for everybody?
Yeah, I'd knock out.
So one thing on the retention end, just trying to keep everyone here and making everyone happy in their jobs. If you examine stipends in this school, they're very skewed. I know that people who are involved with sports are given a very large stipend for only one season, but those who work year-long on certain large projects are really not supported the way that they should be. So attention should really be directed towards that, on what people are getting for all of their hard work and their dedication for the kids that are trying to improve our after-school life, as we've been talking about. So I think that's a very important issue.
So the stipend issue across the board needs to be examined and and check that equity?
Yeah, things need to be balanced a little bit better.
I have one more thing I wanted to throw in. When I was a town councilor, we were approached by the school committee to look at employee health insurance costs. And I don't know if our health insurance is still a lot more expensive than health insurance in other area districts. But I know that that was.
It was improved this year.
It was improved slightly this year, 64 rather.
I'm not sure, I think this is a retention issue though, rather than a PD issue. We have a wonderful specialist throughout our system. For example, the librarian in our school is now offering an after-school, it's a PD thing. She's teaching us how to use the library system, and in doing that and in using the technology for the library, several of us in that group have now taken that to classroom teachers and said, okay, so we want to do a group project when we come in with your children doing this, this, and this. So it's kind of extended the knowledge that the specialists have into the classrooms. And I think for retention purposes, that's very important, because as classroom teachers, we're not art teachers, and we're not librarians, and we're not, phys ed teachers or music teachers. And I think that for retention, we need to do that. It's not just a PD thing, it's letting these people be leaders in their areas, also giving them the freedom to take courses that and do PD that is really in their areas. We don't do that well here.
So I heard a little bit about what you guys were talking about, the sort of the climate culture and the collegiality, the collaboration, which is what you just gave a great example of, when people work together in common projects. It covers lots of different areas: school climate and culture, teacher leadership, professional development, all those things, and retention. Yeah, Mike?
The biggest thing I've heard since we found out about receivership is concerned about merit-based pay and longer school days. I don't know, obviously I don't think we'll have any impact on that when the receiver makes that decision, but I think that might be a straw that breaks some people's backs.
I take it those were not well received.
I think we're already seeing people.
Yeah. So maybe there's the other thing. We just talked about recruitment, retention, bringing people in. I think there's this opportunity where John says what needs to get stopped is the out-migration of people wanting to leave. So that, I think, goes to another aspect of this. So let me ask one quick question. Those recommendations for retention and recruitment seem to fall in the teacher category, and I know leadership is a big bucket. Did any of your groups touch on the retention and recruitment specifically for leaders?
A little bit. One is making sure that we're hiring experience over friendship. Okay, when we're hiring people. And the other thing was there's a number of administrators that are hired to do one job, but they're doing another job. Whether somebody else above them doesn't want to do X job, so they push it onto that. So it goes back to the job description, and this is their job. And if there is no job description, then it just kind of morphs into whatever your boss wants you to do. So.
Okay, thank you.
There was one last thing that I just wanted to piggyback on. You talking about those people leaving. Just a thought, and it's happening out there with some big companies already, phased out retirements. So you can, and maybe teachers coming back as consultants for a little while. It's a transitional thing, something to keep in mind. New way of thinking of not letting those people go in that final day. Instead, reducing hours, having them stay on and teach the person who's coming on.
Graduate release.
some of the high schools, I think, have done that successfully, sort of emeritus kind of, because you can reduce your load and for teach one class and help mentor along. It's going to be great.
Can I elaborate a little bit on the issue of the HR specialist? So we had talked a lot about that in our conversations, right? Just want to get people, like, and I'm also hearing about the professional development side and the logistics of putting together professional development. So I kind of want to give you just a couple of things that an HR person does, right? So first of all, they negotiate union contracts with your advisor. So if you had somebody who could actually save you a lot of money on legal fees that the school system uses by setting up the ground rules and the basic employment practices to negotiate union contracts. So that's actually a cost savings from that position. Work with the administrator to develop professional development, right? So somebody to organize all the professional development with the teachers, put together that development plan, and then work it through with all the different teachers. That's what an HR person would do. Develop the evaluation process for all the teachers and staff to make sure that you understand what the process is, that everybody's evaluated fairly in the same way, make sure that everybody fits into that process, right? And then to work with the administrators to actually do the evaluations. The HR person actually will sit in with the administrators to evaluate employees and make sure that they're doing their jobs. We'll also look at issues like discipline. If somebody needs discipline, to be able to work through the contractual issues as they relate to discipline of all the employees, right? To make sure that the process is fair so the town doesn't get sued because we didn't follow the contractual obligations that are lined up in the contract, right? Actually, they save us money on health insurance and costs as it relates to workers' comp. If we're actually working with employees who are out sick or on workers' comp, they try to get them back faster. That reduces your claims for your insurance company, so it actually even saves on your insurance dollars as well. So that HR person, again, can save you more money. They develop the specific job descriptions to make sure that the job descriptions meet the actual needs of the district to get qualified people in. They also, the same people go out and find ways to advertise the jobs. And they know all the different areas where they can market that position. They also deal with the employee assistance program. So many employees have all kinds of employee assistance issues that they need help on. They have a central place to go. That's my understanding, and this is a failure in all school systems as well as towns, is we're using, I think, a secretarial position to become an HR person. She's leaving. So that's a huge gap. Now you got to start somebody completely inexperienced, the secretary, who doesn't know all the HR laws in the state of Massachusetts. So this is, in my opinion, a very big time to look at that position because it could save you one lawsuit alone and could cost you 200 grand easily. So that HR position, if you pay 80 grand for it in 1 year, it'd be easy to save that position on top of all the other savings you can get from that position. There never was one here, and a lot of school districts don't do it, but it's a big failure and it could save us a lot of money.
I think we have to be
So
careful.
this may be the last comment. This is, we've got 2 more buckets to go. Go ahead.
Just the schools, I think, operate differently than like a business model. So, you know, HR person can do evaluations or any of those things. It's just tricky at the union. They, you know, they'd have to be sort of a teacher. Like, it's a real difficult model.
Just kind of, there's HRs that are trained in that model as well.
Okay. All right. So,
So, you know, my sense is a break would be good here now, but I'm worried because we're going to lose 2 people. And we have 2 significant buckets that we've got to get to before the end of this meeting. So I feel like I need to be tough on you and push through because I want to get as many of our contributions as possible. All right? And then we'll take a break and then we'll come in the last week. Hang in there, please. So stick with the groups. You got to choose one of 2 buckets. They're both critical, and I want to just tell you about what they look like. One is curriculum. You know, this is,
Can we get side conversations right now? Because this is an important setup.
so one is curriculum, and you know we've already touched upon it in terms of curriculum planning, but there's issues related to our bilingual students. You know, and how that gets infused. Joan made a reference earlier about co-teaching, inclusive classrooms. How do we get that? There's a lot of pieces where curriculum has been undernourished and unfocused for a while in the district. So we definitely need some attention in that area and beef up our thinking. And then the second bucket we talked about earlier, which I think is sort of, it could be a big elephant in the room, which is culture and climate, but particularly the ability to really feel comfortable and confident and psychologically safe enough to address issues within the community. To have difficult and courageous conversations and not feel like your job is in jeopardy. And I'm trying to make sure we don't miss that and we have full attention to it. So take a minute. We need some distribution. At least one group has to at least cover curriculum. I'm a little worried about how it's going to get divided up, but I don't know how it is. Let's see how it works. Talk to your partners. Which of those topics do you want to pick and choose?
Are we all?
Good. Thank you. All right, got to make decisions. We stay on schedule. Topic? What do we got now? All right.
Those details, which one that you're...
Okay, we got 4 for culture and climate. Our bookend groups are going to do curriculum. You do not have to come up with 3 recommendations. One recommendation that you feel is potent and powerful is better than 3 diluted ones. So don't feel like it says 1, 2, 3 in your sheets that you have to fill in the blanks. You don't. So we're gonna have this conversation for 12 minutes and then whip around with our recommendations. So dive in.
I think we're doing curriculum. I think
You guys,
we can decide when we get around.
this
One. I would say one of the a lot of time we're focused students I have one in my family. Yeah. Okay. I always struggle. I want them to see opportunities. I didn't know what the proper, I don't want to use the proper term, but I want to use it. I know
the needs of all students, not only one population.
I don't even know the population is more.
How to address learning needs.
Yeah, okay.
All levels.
That's better than, okay. I think that spells it out. Because I'm in that fight right now in school. My oldest is here. My youngest is last year. He scored on the maps. He scored on 12th grade English level. Yes, he did. He had a great. And to be honest with you, both my two kids now go to preschool.
I read something that, I read something, I don't know what to say. Before, when they came out of the about, what was working well in the same time, that kind
I just wanted to make sure, okay, because I got stuck in a situation as business at work. I wanted to make sure that.
We realize that not everyone can take every single deal.
All right, as long as, I just wanted to make sure that got across, I wasn't stuck in my responsibility. Okay, thank you, sir. He's in it now, I guess. Both of my children are, well, my youngest one is in Excel, I would say. The oldest one is in honors classes.
I always think that, all the students are so what I want to tell them, I'm going to think that maybe right hand that all you have that maybe
They do shop. They have technology.
I don't know what it's talking so they are over here and they will kind of study nothing of
Just kind of curiosity. Early funds program.
We do foundation. And we also have our literacy program for children.
Okay.
So there's like phonics and
And you've been trained enough to do all
foundation, we did 2 days. So we did, and this is like our 5th year.
Okay, so you get that in place.
I could do that.
Well, that's great, because I mean, that's a really good foundation.
And our piece was just having the owl.
Okay.
So they're getting a big before they go.
so I think
No. I don't disagree.
I remember that you also have
That's what I did. In mine, I sketched. And I was
what about the health classes?
they're not gonna work for this.
That they don't feel they're not interested in.
2-minute warning, 2-minute warning.
They have to get that.
Those are the people that look for when they come out of school.
Fui vocational, ele está en una vocational
It was like 51
or they don't qualify. They are now having more qualifications.
1 minute to go. 1 minute.
But you didn't want, as a student, you had
All right. All right, I want to start with culture and climate. We had a last-minute switch. So we have 3 groups who did curriculum, 3 who did culture and climate. So any of the 1, 2, I believe 3 did culture and climate. So can we start with the recommendations from one of the groups?
Go ahead. So we said for culture and climate that we need to set clear expectations and accountability of those expectations for leadership, staff, and students.
So clear expectations, and then there's accountability for those expectations, and it covers all 3 significant stakeholders: students, staff, and administrators.
So can I ask a question? So you have a handbook, right, that goes to the students, and do they have to sign? Or no, they don't, so do you know if they read
They
it
do
or?
at the elementary level, parents have to sign this.
I know, that one I know for sure, at Wesley. Because I'm just thinking, I have a kid in the middle school, I don't ever remember having to sign anything that said, this is,
I'm not sure.
these are the reasons for discipline, this is what you can expect as a student for discipline.
Right.
In fact, up until 4 years ago, every student was given a handbook and an agenda book. So it was a complete book, ran at about $5.50 apiece. Every student was given one and signed for one. I don't know when that disappeared, but that's my understanding.
We still have it at the
At
elementary.
the elementary, but.
I just think it's a great, you're talking about that, and I'm thinking to myself, as a parent, boy, I'd love to, not only is my student gonna read it, hope, or we're gonna force
I
them
think
to
it's
read it.
the follow-through that's that much more important. I mean, say, these are your expectations. If kids don't meet those expectations, there's no accountability, no follow-through. Then
I'm just thinking of it as in a business sense, okay? Not only as a parent of kids, but working in a business and being a manager of a manufacturing company. We have a handbook too, and inside are the guidelines of behavior. And you know what happens to you if you don't meet one of those guidelines of behavior. Clear and simple, you sign it, you've agreed to it, those discussions are very easy afterwards.
But that
And the
does,
student needs to, the student knows that.
but that doesn't happen here. because
That's my only comment, I'm just
that's
trying
what
to
I'm
piggyback onto that.
We have handbooks, but it's not like we're really, it becomes another thing to fit the never-ending
Yeah, but I wouldn't
case
suggest putting all of it.
of things that we do around.
I mean, it seems very arbitrary from the teacher's perspective. I can only imagine what kids see something happen and this kid's back in class 5 minutes later when it's something pretty egregious,
Well,
or
as a parent, that's exactly what
this kid
what I'm
goes home for 2 days and the other kid's back a class later. Like, I mean, what message is that really send?
Depends on the course, quite frankly.
So I think you said that their teachers do go over the handbook before school starts, is that correct? I don't think anything like that really happens for the students that do have to follow those rules. So maybe something that can be implemented is kind of an education of the rules and expectations at the start of the year, not in the middle, not at the end, when things are going up, at the beginning, so that students can know, if I do this, I know that this is going to happen.
So I don't want to put words in the mouth from your group, but I actually heard two ideas, and I want to check it out. One is about consistency, and having things written down, going over them, and having the words mean something is a theme that we just heard, and we've heard it before. But I thought I heard a second idea in there, that it's a mutual set of expectations. Like, this is what we expect of students, but what do students expect of teachers? And what can teachers expect of administrators, as well as what administrators can expect of teachers? Like, there's a mutuality of expectations that's embedded in accountability. And it's not just top down. And I've been trying to weave into my head some of the conversation. So did you mean to imply that the expectations have to go in both directions?
Absolutely. Yes, and I think also that, you know, if you expect a teacher to maintain classroom management and have, you know, certain code of discipline and, you know, being after school, giving out detentions, giving lunch detentions, whatever the case may be, and we just need a little support if, you know, you have a kid in detention and he starts telling you where to go, or, you know, and if we don't have that support, then it just kind of makes what we do just, you know, there's no...
Right. So if the expectation of teachers is to run an effective management of a class, part of that expectation is that administrators will support that teacher for complicated and, you know, difficult cases, you know, and that students need to behave in a certain way. I mean, it's a combination of things. Okay, got it. Another recommendation.
So, to kind of go along with that, we looked at the culture between schools and families. And we said, you know, every student here belongs to all of us. They belong to our district, not just their family. And to better that culture between families and schools, not just parents, but just families and schools, we need to provide wraparound services, which we've talked about at length, so we won't go over that, but also alternative programs within the school settings to support children who cannot access the traditional school programs successfully. Why are students in ISS? Is it because we are not providing the type of learning that they can access? Because it goes two ways. We expect that they're going to do their best. We also have to provide programs that they can access. If they are children who are traumatized, if they are children who have severe cognitive disabilities, we need to provide those programs, not just in special education, but throughout general education as well. So the alternative programs or pathways, we're beginning to diversify. That needs to be supported totally throughout the system in both general education and special education.
And ISS stands for?
Internal school system.
Inside school system.
All right, so I wanted to make sure I knew what that meant. And what you're saying is that the culture between families and schools needs to be such that we meet the needs of students.
Mutual support.
And that may mean that in some cases we need to create alternative pathways for some students.
Okay, let me deal with the elephant in the room here. Something was said at a couple of meetings ago that, as delicate as I can here, that resulted in an administrator approaching a teacher about what was said, that then resulted in teachers, members of this stakeholder groups, now being reluctant to come forward because they don't want to be approached. I think that is an issue, I think, about open and honest. We've been trying to be open and honest around here, and you know, one of the teacher members said, I'm reluctant to bring something forward because of when this person brought it forward, it resulted in, I wouldn't say an administrative discipline, but I would say a fallout from the administrator, directly associated, from that. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment about that.
Well, I think we just need to realize that everyone is here to improve things. And if you don't look at things honestly, they won't improve. Brush things under the rug, they won't improve. Nobody should be criticized for any of the programs we have. We have had tumultuous leadership programs, reading series, math series. We need to just move on. We need to be able to trust that we're all going to do that together.
So I'm trying to capture that in a recommendation. And what I'm hearing is that in order to move forward, I'm hearing two things, that we need to be able to raise concerns and be able to have a discussion about it and not feeling that in some way or another we're not contributing to the system if we raise concerns.
So
And also, there's a concern that we want to hide things that are happening around here. We don't want people to know certain things. And, if we're going to fix things around here, we've got to be open and honest about our problems around here. We need to address them head on and not an attempt to kind of place blame. Blame covers the gambit from parents all the way up to the superintendent. That's not what we should be doing now. We should be trying to fix the issues and bringing things forward for that.
So to be able to analyze and discuss our problems without blame.
Yeah.
And to be able to, I think what the literature calls map the contribution system. So that you try to take something apart and realize that there are many contributions to that problem. It's not about blaming people, it's trying to find a solution. Right?
So I think perhaps those teacher leadership teams that we recommended would be helpful, because I know when it was brought up about the team chairs and the confusion about goals and IEPs, I addressed that with my team chairs. That's my department, I'm a special ed supervisor. So I've been in the process the last 2 weeks analyzing both team chairs' IEPs. I'm attending a meeting this week and next week for both the two different team chairs. We've addressed we gave like a SPED 101 presentation in that particular school. So I think it's important to bring those issues forward, because I had no idea. So that was the first time I had learned about it in this group. So being able to have that communication is really important, because I don't know if there's a problem if nobody tells me.
Right, and the key, I think what I'm hearing is not only the ability to bring them up, but it's the way we bring them up, right? Because if it's brought up in the spirit of anger or blame, then it's going to feel like it's not in the spirit of trying to get better. And that's always tricky, because part of that is how we talk about things, but it's also about how people hear them.
Right.
It's always a combination of both.
And if you bring it up in a public setting, a lot of people are going to talk about it, and it becomes sort of an opinion.
All right, I think we have some language, though, that we can move forward. Another recommendation in this arena?
Just to kind of continue with that, if you look at the culture between the administration and the educators and EAs and everyone in the building, if you look at that culture and you talk about teams and leadership teams, I think we have to be careful that people that are on teams that are called leaders actually represent the people that they are representing. And to that end, maybe when we start with your most basic teams, say a subject in middle school or a grade in an elementary school, that the people that are on that team need to have input into who their team leader is. Because when we have too many layers of leaders, now you're not really talking. Now you have the telephone and you're passing it around, and by the time it gets to the other end of the table, it might be a whole different conversation. So, and I think there needs to be teams. You can't just have, but I think that you need to look at, if you want to look at the culture between administration and educators, I think we have a great culture. And I think that we need to build on the great part of it. There are some things that need to be fixed. So I think if we look at leadership teams, the leadership teams need to be selected from the bottom up to build the confidence that things are going to move up and down in leadership.
So help me understand, if we're talking about the secondary world and there's a math department, or I'm science department, pick on any department, you're suggesting that the leader of that department, whether it's a teacher leader, department head, however we call it, should
be chosen by the rest of the team.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure. And a grade level leader should be chosen
By the rest of the team. I think that people naturally, some people are great leaders, some people naturally are great contributors and they build great leaders. And any team, people are going to fall out that way. So let's encourage that instead of working against it.
And so, just to be clear, is your recommendation that leadership positions in the school, not specifically like the principalship, but the, things like department heads or classroom or grade level leaders, should have input from the team, or the team should actually be chosen specifically by the team members?
I think it depends on the team. I think it could work both ways.
All right, thank you. Other recommendations?
Could I just add learning walks? I think as teachers, we get our best ideas from other teachers. And when you develop, different teams of teachers to walk through classrooms and get ideas and generate good practice and be able to have those healthy discussions that, maybe aren't critical, but, I really like how you did this, or did you know that Johnny wasn't paying attention, or was off task 6 times? Those are really helpful to develop a good team, so to speak.
The more we can talk about our practice, as exemplified by the learning walks, that might help with culture in plan.
And build that trust.
Can I also add, because I absolutely agree, sometimes we get professional development people in that have no idea of this place or, what would work in here. They come from Newton or something and says, oh, you should be doing this. It's not going to work here. And so having teachers who know how to work with our kids and say, hey, this works. This is what I worked in my class. I learned more on a learning walk at West Street School once than I learned in 50 professional developments.
And this ties to that thing that came up in the last discussion about having a teacher, really lead PD. All right, let's close out culture and climate. Any last recommendations?
So you touched on something very important at the start of the meeting, where there needs to be comfort so ideas can be shared. The same I feel can happen in the classroom. There are kids that won't get support that they need or even provide input during a classroom setting because there's just discomfort. So really adding support, we've talked about it before, ELL and special ed support in a classroom, really making a teacher as a minimum. So if there is a group, I don't know what the minimum would be, but a group of a certain amount of students is really needs one person to support said group. So if they have any questions that they can deal with a little bit quieter and they'll get some feedback and they won't really have any kind of anxiety about it. Also, from when I talk to people and also in this set of recommendations, item 2, safe and secure learning environment that Mr. Williams had provided. School-based psychologist for students that are really struggling with behavioral issues. Because once those are corrected, even at an earlier age in the elementary levels, all little outbursts and really issues that are troubling to kind of get a grasp on can be supported, figured out why these things are happening.
So to provide structure and resources, for example, some kind of ratio for kids that may have special needs and or emotional needs, so that, like a mirror image, that kids in the classroom will feel safe to contribute and ask questions the way we want adults to feel safe to ask questions and make recommendations.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move on to curriculum.
Can I do my logistic thing before we lose people?
Yeah.
So I just have one thing before people start to head out. Hold on, Heather, can you wait? So the town council chairman, Mr. Frosco, has asked to send an email to all LSG members, and he doesn't have email addresses for everyone. And before I shared out some of the personal email addresses that I have for folks, I just wanted to see if anybody was opposed to me sharing your email address to the town council chairman. If he has a lot of them already because they're public on the Southbridge website, but if you have given me a personal email address or a work email address, and you are not comfortable with me sharing, I do not have to share it, so you can either tweet to me privately or you can email me if you do not want me to share it, and I'm going to get back to him tomorrow if I don't hear from anyone.
Maybe at the break, people can talk.
Sure.
All right, curriculum, recommendation.
Can I sum it up in one big sentence?
Love it.
District-wide vertically aligned curriculum from K to 12 to address the needs of all levels of students, paying attention to both ends of the spectrum, not just at the low end.
So vertically aligned district effort to develop curriculum that focuses on all student needs, but particular our neediest students as well as our most skilled and
A
competent.
lot of times we focus on that low end and kind of,
Miss the
I don't want
area.
to say neglect, but yeah,
Okay,
That's what's over.
yeah.
and the curriculum could offer lots of suggestions and ideas and frames for teachers, and we need more of that based on your information. How about another curriculum group? Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the fact that the district has put a lot of time and effort into the curriculum at the lower level. The K through 5 curriculum, they've paid teachers during the summer, the last 2 summers, and also after school hours, but they neglected the middle high school curriculum for, I don't know why, but they did. So we think there should be a curriculum committee at the middle high school level, and that committee should contain some key people, teachers, as well as the principal and the coordinator or director of curriculum and instruction, that they do a review and then prioritize, just like they did at the elementary, and then do the scope and sequence for the curriculum. That work hasn't happened at the middle high school to its expectations.
So to accelerate the work, particularly at the secondary, middle, and high school levels, to have a committee of stakeholders and experts really examine middle school and high school issues, develop a sequence of areas, and take them apart one at a time so you get the scope and sequence on those
And I
pieces.
think the biggest piece of that is they paid elementary teachers during the summer to do that work, recognizing that that work cannot happen during the school year, during the work day of teaching. And they neglected to do that at the middle high school.
Okay. Great suggestion.
So, just tapping onto both of them, and then I'll do it, that will be after break. But, one of the things that Rebecca had pointed out relative to the middle high school level is just the experience of the teachers, and that there are fairly new teachers. So there could be sometimes first-year teachers that are writing curriculum that they don't even know the district yet, or the kids, or some of the issues. And so one of the things that came up relative to that is not only putting together curriculum teams and writing really concrete curriculum relative to that, but having outside consultants from middle and high schools to be able to come in and actually provide support. So still teacher-driven, still building-driven, but have it be that there's the supports from outside entities to come in and help with that.
To ensure quality.
To ensure quality and, proven methods that have happened in other districts, for instance. And then one of the things that we had talked about was around when you're looking at curriculum and you were talking about both ends of the spectrum, but thinking, kind of having a paradigm shift a little bit of thinking on the high end, and then how do you build accommodations to support the high end? So rather than starting with a baseline that all kids should know this, and maybe some will get to here, start here, and what accommodations need to be developed below that for students to access the curriculum. So rather than thinking of it as, you know, the bare minimum of what every kid should learn, think about what's the bar, you know, where do we want them to reach and how do we scaffold up? Was
Very
big
powerful
on the
idea.
spectrum.
So developing curriculum that aims high,
Right.
and then spending resources and strategies to build scaffolds so that kids who have different kinds of needs can attain that, but don't aim at the middle.
Right.
Really interesting idea.
And then just, those were looking into those, and then our other idea that came up was just having similar strategies around things like literacy and writing skills, and making sure that across curriculum, that those strategies are being mirrored in every content area, and there's like a universal discussion or a universal way to approach particularly literacy and writing skills across the curriculum.
So that since reading and writing cuts across so many different curricula, to come across and develop powerful approaches that need to be consistent if we're going to gain the power across multiple ages, multiple domains. Anything else on curriculum before we take a break?
We had one other one. Having an alternative curriculum for students who choose to stay in Southbridge but don't necessarily want to go the college route and more a vocational route.
So for students who have a technical or vocational aspirations, to provide them some pathway, to get those aspirations met through some kind of curriculum that pays attention to those needs. Currently, there are none, or it's narrow?
Bay Path, if you go to compare, you go to Bay Path for high school if you want to do
And
that.
I think there are some limited options here.
I don't think everybody can get into it.
Yeah,
There's
so
a few options.
There's
There's
engineering and there's kind of like a wood shop, it's like tucked away. But there are some areas that a job can stem from, but not very much.
And some of the kids who truly could benefit from the Big Bad curriculum don't qualify to get in. So, and I'm not up to par on all of the criteria for entrance, but it's a different world than like when we went to school and the voc option and how that fit. And so from my understanding actually, is there are the academic achieving students who are interested in voc tech are the first to be able to receive the spots through early acceptance. And there are less spots available for your, average student who that is the path they want to truly take. So that is an issue.
And attendance and behavior can play a role.
Exactly.
So your recommendation was to expand the possibilities here in Southbridge.
Right.
Can I just add, I think there's a way of pulling some of this together, is that we have businesses in town, manufacturing businesses in town, and, looking at this as from a collaborative model, trying to be more collaborative with the hides and the other tech things where we can provide those kind of trainings, within this building, those classes and training.
So tap into community resources, you would probably, maybe
Yeah,
that was expand that.
That's actually extracurricular, that they could be, it could be a work study at one of the places in town.
Well, I like the piggyback, that's a great idea. I mean, because that's the pool of kids
Right.
and students that someday people like myself are gonna have to hire. Because the kids that wanna come to work at Hyde are not kids that have a college education, unless they wanna be an engineer, or they wanna do design, we have manufacturing jobs there. And that's the pool.
Can I just, what could you provide, what could Hyde provide in the school that, is the best answer for Hyde to come into the school, or is it for kids to go to Hyde? And
Well, no, but that's a good,
We don't have to answer that now. That's the idea.
because, it's like, do we provide it, or?
I'm sure it's not just Hyde, but I'm sure there are a lot of
A
manufacturing
partnership, whatever that is.
companies that think that way.
All right, it's 6:05, we're gonna come back at 6:15, and we're going to plan the last meeting. We want you to know in advance what it's gonna look like, because it's gonna be technical, and you're gonna have to do some homework. So, we'll see you at 6:15.
School, culture. during the, I feel that thing going off, and I'm like, this must be school.
Here we go.
Bring it back.
So, here, let's finish up in the next 10 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes to fill out the evaluation sheet. All right, so thank you for all your contributions today. The discussion was great. I think we got a lot of good information. John and I quickly talked. When we talk about buckets, we're talking about that first column, the recommendations column. It looks like there'll be 14 of them by the time we revise that document, and we'll send it out to you. So on that new document, there'll be 14 recommendations in the left-hand column, 14 buckets per column. Here's what your task is going to be, and we'll give you directions, but I want to foreshadow the next meeting for you. So of those 14, you're going to choose the 5 that you think would be the most important for the receiver to focus his or her attention on. So the first thing you do is look through those, prioritize 5 for you. It's going to be different for everybody probably, or maybe some commonality, some overlap. Once you pick your 5 buckets, your job is to look at the first one and then take the top 3 recommendations from the list there and just, put a little star next to them. You don't even have to rank order those. You can if you like. Take 3 of the recommendations from that bucket. Those are your top 3 for that. Do the same thing for all 5 buckets. Okay? So then you're going to come to the meeting having read all of them and prioritize your 5 areas and your top 3 recommendations in each area. We're going to have these charts, 14 charts, put around the room, and you're going to get 10 dots. And you're going to place those 10 dots in whatever way you want. You can place 1 in each 10, or you can say, nope, I'm picking, 5 on this one because it was my favorite and I really want this to be in there. And you can distribute your 10 dots in any way you want. That's going to give us a sense of what the group's prioritized areas are. And from there, we'll then start to look at whatever those buckets are, or those recommendations are, what are the specifics underneath that we want to shine a light on. Okay? Does that make sense?
10 dots.
Well,
10 dots.
Sure you can, because you can put all 10 in one if you want. You can put 3.
I get 12 dots.
An underground economy will be selling.
Can I buy dots?
You can still
I got a box of donuts here for 1 dot.
All right, so that's what's coming up for our next and last meeting. We think that will get us to a place where we've got some sense of direction for the receiver, and I think it should work pretty well.
And just to preface, sorry Dave, just to preface again, beyond the meeting, there's no more editing or adding recommendations. So what we decide in next week's meeting will be the recommendations that move forward, aside from any copy edits like puncture, grammar, spelling, anything like that, and formatting of the document. But what we walk away with at the next session will be the recommendations that we'll submit to the commissioner and the receiver for their consideration in the development of the turnaround plan. So it's really important that you come having read the email that I'm going to send to you on Thursday, those emerging recommendations, that you read through those, because you're signing off on the recommendations. So if you're not totally clear, or you're not for any of the recommendations that are in there, or if you really want to make sure that one of the recommendations gets in there, you need to make your voice heard next week. Dave.
Can we have our document submitted along with that, with the recommendation as a separate document? So just the
You
teachers.
can have an appendix
Right, okay, not part of it, but it can be part of the packet that gets sent.
So
from
what
the
we
people.
did in Holyoke was that we had made a separate appendix or attachment to the LSU recommendations. And you can submit those recommendations on behalf of the teachers union or the SEA, not on behalf of this group.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But just so
Just
you know,
part
the
of it.
document that Lauren's gonna send out on
It's the
Thursday
group.
will contain, embedded into the 14 buckets, every one of the things that's on your document. So that everyone has a fair shot of sort of endorsing them or not, depending on what buckets get picked. You know what I'm saying?
I
So
do.
they will be they'll be baked into the document that goes out to you on Thursday.
I still would like.
Yeah, that's your right.
Yeah.
The community meetings that were held, we still haven't heard any of those.
Yeah, so I actually just got in touch with my colleague. They're currently being, the notes from them are being typed up by the parent liaisons in the district, and so we hope to have them later in the week, and we'll send them to you. But those are gonna go as a separate attachment to the receiver and commissioner anyways, and they will be able to review those notes. So you can, when I send them out, you can read them and like cross-reference, but those recommendations do not have to appear in ours for the commissioner and receiver to see them. They will get them as an aside.
Okay, last task of the day, just quickly, if you would we take this information real seriously and like to read it, so if you fill out the evaluation form for this meeting, and hope you have a good week, we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Next week's meeting will go from 4 to 6:30 in this room. 4 to 6:30 in this room. What likes here?
Anybody?
That's why it's gonna be.